a really important thing when you have made a game that you have to take it to the platform publishers. So we'll go into kind of the basics of that, as well as just some basic tips on improving it, things to avoid, and so on. So we'll start.
Cool. Yeah, just give a little bit of an introduction to Congregate. So Congregate is a leading publisher for mobile, web, and beyond. And when I say beyond, we're talking about everything from Amazon to iOS to web to, and looking forward to Steam and other platforms. So some of our biggest titles is Venture Capitalist and Bullet Boy, Spellstone, and recently Tap Adventure for Android, and Battlehand. So Congregate has its roots in being a web platform. This is our 10th year being a web platform. And we've had over 100,000 games since the birth of that platform back in 2006.
Great. So just starting this off, if your game isn't good, none of this will help. The number one thing that people ask me is, how can I bring this? And, the first thing is that you have to really kind of take that introspective and make sure that your product is great, that people want to play it and that they want to play it a lot and well. And so all of these are really to help out with the finished product. There's only so much you can do for a game that might not be at its best. So the kind of just to start going over just a couple of definitions in here. When I talk about platforms, I'm talking about sales platforms. I'm talking about going to Apple, going to Google, Amazon, Steam, any of the other kind of marketplaces, be it like the Samsung markets, individual platform, console, any of those providers are your platforms, and you want to try to get features because, as we all know, mobile is so feature-driven at this date and time. Publishers, on the other hand, are going to be ones that you can pitch to them, and then they are the ones who are going to deal with the platforms. Direct publishing is kind of like us. We are a third-party publisher. We work with developers to work on their games, fund their games, improve their games, and then we are the ones who will actually go to the platforms and handle those relationships. Sub-publishers, basically the same thing, except that you might have a main publisher who will then get sub-publishers for certain regions. That happens a lot in very much Asian regions, Middle Eastern, Indian, anywhere where there's a lot of smaller marketplaces, that there's going to be a lot more of those. And then, of course, you can go the self-publishing route where you yourself are going to the platforms.
Sure. So one of the biggest questions that we get is, why do I need a publisher? Why would you go with a publisher? And just my biggest advice that I can give for this is that you want to find a publisher that matches you and what you're trying to accomplish with the game. So often you get into a relationship with a publisher and they have different ideas for what they want to do and they don't match up with what you're trying to do as a game developer. So you need to be able to drive that vision together as a group. The strongest teams are the ones who know what they're capable of and what they need help in. And you should be going to a publisher and saying, this is what we're really great in. This game concept is really great, but these are the things that I need help on. This is what I'm looking for, whether it be funding or whether it be marketing, whether it's user acquisition. You just need to be really cognizant that you have things that you want from a publisher. And needing a publisher doesn't mean you're failing. What's that? And that kind of leads into what isn't a publisher. And we get these questions all the time, and we get asked about certain things. And the biggest one, first and foremost, is publishers are not ATMs. They're not endless amounts of supplies of money that you keep pulling from. It's not something where you just have an endless revenue flow. It's basically, you're working with us to understand how much money you need for your concept and what you need in terms of runway to make sure you can finish your game. Publishers should never guarantee featuring. They should never say that Apple is going to guarantee you a feature. They should never say that you are going to be that featured banner roll at the top. Any publisher who is guaranteeing something that they can't 100% deliver on is not a publisher you should be working with. Again, going back onto design, a publisher isn't going to be able to fix your bad game design. If your game design is not great out of the gate, a publisher is not going to be able to come in and say, here's 2 things you need to fix, instant feature on Apple and Google. That's just not how it works at all. And the final thing is that publishers aren't soulless money machines. This is something that's close to my heart as a game developer. I was in the indie game space for over 10 years. Understanding that a publisher is with you along the way and that you're both working together on the same project is really important. They're not there just to take all the money away from you from your project. They're there to help you and to work together on this game together.
And if they aren't doing that, don't work with them. Cool. So getting into the platform stuff while you're pitching to them, like I said, featuring, getting those features, be it on Apple in the new and best games, Google new games, getting to the top of the charts. That's going to be their best way of getting organics without having to try to spend on UA, which is a lot of what we're all dealing with here today. And so you want to start a relationship early, and you want to keep that relationship going. You have to really remember that the platforms are worldwide. That while the Google Play Store might not be fully regionalized in something like China, you do need to remember that it is in Mexico. There are different people in charge of the different regions, so you can try to get features in those different regions. It's not all about the top three. It's not all about US, Eastern Europe, any of those. So you really want to start those relationships early. This is just going to be a really quick thing on what is a pitch deck. All the slides kind of after are going to go over information that you should know that you're going to want to present. A lot of this you can put into the pitch deck. It's a basic document. You can make a PowerPoint, PDF, anything like that. And it goes over all the information that is very easy to put up front. And then you can really start diving into the things that you want to get into with the platforms and publishers and get questions from them to answer them. You always have limited time, limited attention span of anybody. So you really want to kind of distill this information down. So a pitch deck is exactly that. You want to, put this information in. You can find these layouts pretty much anywhere. I think they even come with PowerPoint, but the best thing is you don't want to just be white slides with like 2 points. You might remember the cat later on. That's part of the whole thing. You want this to be unique. You want the publisher to remember you, the platform to remember you.
So again, the most important thing you can do is make it unique. So as publishers, we see hundreds of emails asking for games to be published underneath us, and your ability to stand out in that group of emails is incredibly important. In a lot of ways, your game has to be just really stellar, but on top of that, you have to be able to sell it as a stellar game. You need the game, again, we're going to keep reiterating this throughout the presentation, but your game needs to be stellar. Your ability for your game to be stellar is going to be its best-selling feature. Ways you can show that your game is really stellar is incredible media. Things that we definitely ask for in terms of publishing, and which is real great to add and just send us in the initial pitch, is screenshots, online build access, and videos of gameplay. These are kind of the three major things that we always want to see in the pitches that are coming to publishing. Just to kind of drill down into why. Screenshots, concept art, sample art, it gives us a really good feel of what the game's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, kind of the steps you're taking in art. It helps us understand the marketing that we could do on the game. And it tells a lot more than text can often do. And it's a really easy way for us to see where this game is going and what potential it has. The same goes for video. Video is one of the most important things you can send us, because video gives us a quick 2-minute way to look at the game, see all of the steps in the game, kind of see the core loop, and get a real good feel for the game without even having to play it. But the best thing you can do is send us a build. So if you send us something from TestFlight or an APK, or even just send us an online build, this is going to give us a lot of information about the game, and we're going to get a real good feel for it.
Yeah, just to add on to that, with the test flights, it doesn't have to be a complete game. Even something like a vertical slice, a demo, anything to really get, what we're looking at a lot of times is the core game loop, to make sure that's solid, that's fun. There's a lot of things that, that's the things you're looking for in a publisher. If you're trying to improve monetization because that's what you're not aware of, then you need to show off the things that you are good at. Show off that really fun gameplay that you know is going to bring people in.
Yeah, never be scared to send us unfinished content. We see unfinished content pretty much more than we see finished content. So we know what an unfinished game looks like. Yeah.
All right, so this one, Know Thyself. This is the stuff in the first couple slides, really the pitch deck that you want to show off. Really the game, if it's already out or if you've done some test runs, anything like that. First, show us the core loop, show us what's there. Know your KPIs if you have those things from test markets, like your retention. Also have the amount of users. If you only had 12 users in that, the retention, and any of those numbers aren't going to be statistically significant. So know that. Have your roadmap. Tell us how long you've been working on it. Tell us how long you have left. Feature maps. Basically, all information that's available. A lot of the things that people want to hear about are your reasoning. Why did you choose this over this? It really helps everyone to see the process. Another thing that's kind of really important is putting the team information. We've gotten pitches where they have not even mentioned how many people are on the team, how many people have worked on this, who they are. And it's really important to see if you've made games before, we want to hear about that. So how many people are there, what their positions are, how many programmers, if you're making a massive multiplayer, like if you're making a MOBA, all right, what's your backend look like? Do you have any backend engineers? Like that's going to be pretty important. For previous games, even if the game wasn't a success, if you have any postmortems, things like that, it's all really good information to include. It shows, what are the learnings? Where do you want to go? And then the basic BD stuff, the kind of stuff that I particularly dig into of numbers and business things. So know what your burn rate is. Your burn rate, the definition of that is figure out, for your whole team, what the monthly cost is to keep that team going. And then if you're running a couple projects at once, you want to know, all right, the 3 people that are working on this project, this is their particular burn rate. This helps with figuring out your needs. So a few of these that are specific for the platforms being, you want to show off your team. If somebody worked in a couple other fantastic games, put that in there. Make sure you include the information that's going to really help sell your game to get noticed. The next one is, knowing your endeavor, knowing who you're talking to is really important. If it's the platforms, you need to know something like, oh, I'm pitching to Google today. They really love analytics. So have some of those numbers. Make sure you're prepared for when they ask you those numbers. You're going to find the right person to talk to. I'm sure the first question is how do I find those people? That's a good question. Really, it's just going to be talking to other developers, finding out if you can get onto their contact, going through any channels of submitting the game, seeing if you can get a name, a person. That's probably the hardest thing in, I think, this whole deck is finding the person to talk to. I could give an entire talk on just finding those people and tracking them down and talking to them. Conferences like this are a really good way to do that. Figure out who you want to talk to, find their email, make sure to send them a well-rounded email at first, get that introduction, and go from there. Publishers, as John was mentioning, you want to know who does what. If you're pitching a match 3 and you're talking to someone who just does CCGs in their portfolio, they might want to expand their portfolio, but you have to know that's what they're particularly good at. You want to find the right fit. And it's finding the right person there, too. You can go into the fun fact if you would like.
Yeah, so the most interesting thing we get is people come to us as a publisher and don't know who we are at all. The best one is that we've had someone call us the wrong company name for the entire meeting, even after we corrected them and said, no, we're this other, we're Congregate, we're not this other company. And they're like, oh yeah, no, get it. Yeah, so again, your ability to interact with this publisher and have a real conversation about the game is super important. So ask real good questions. This is one of the strongest things we see with teams, is that teams that ask really good questions are often teams that we want to work with. We want to know that you're interested in what we do. We're interested in what value we can provide. We want to know that you're as hungry as we are to make a really good game. And again, this is a partnership. This is us working together on a title together. We should be maximizing our strengths together and adding them together to make this really good game. And you should be asking us, how do you handle UA? What is the process behind that? What's that going to cost me? Just ask the questions, even if they kind of seem like dumb questions because you've never worked with a publisher before. We want to hear you ask those questions. We don't want you just to assume that we're going to be really good at UA. Like, really ask us what we do. Another thing, if we don't want to run with your game, if it's just not a good match for us, or if it's, you decide you don't want to work with us as a publisher, we should talk about it. We should say, why don't we want to work with each other? And then that can help us both grow as both developer and publisher. And it's good to ask questions. It's good to ask why your game wasn't accepted.
Yeah, I put in the little star within reason. Turning somebody down on a feature or a publishing deal is very difficult, and so I'm always glad to give feedback. And sometimes it just doesn't make sense that you should actually self-publish. It's a much better idea. So generally, you can get a good response. Some things, like certain platforms, will give you a generic email and never tell you anything, and that's just kind of the way it is. But you can generally expect a good response. But if you expect a back and forth, of 10 emails of like, what if I fix this one thing? What if I fix this? It's probably not in anybody's best interest. But getting at least the overarching reasons helps to figure out why. Sometimes the analytics-based platforms will say, we just don't like your D30. Retention's really hard to fix, but it's something that really good to know what that is for future titles.
And we just also want to give a few reasons. This is basically maybe a tenth of the reasons why pitches get rejected. It can be for any amount of reasons, but the biggest one is that the game doesn't shown well, or it isn't shown well. And this is a really big deal. You gotta show us the game. This is your one shot at showing a publisher, this specific publisher, a game. So if you're not showing the game well, it's really detrimental to your game and to your chances of getting published. And I'm not going to list all of these, but another big one is that your needs are too risky, or you're asking for way too much from a publisher, and often we just can't service that. And if we can't service it, we're not going to sign it, because we don't want your game to fail because we can't live up to what we're promising. And then, as Melinda mentioned before, a lot of games don't need a publisher. You have all the strengths to get this game to market. You can do this on your own. You have all the pieces on your team. Us coming in and taking a rev share on your game, or whatever we're doing in our partnership, it's not going to be helpful.
Yeah, that's basically all of those. You just want to make sure that everything's ready. And kind of the last one really comes in of just keeping a very professional tone. The industry is incredibly fun, and I love it so much. And you can joke around, but there's certain limits, and don't be scary. So on that note, it's not no forever. As I mentioned, you don't want to go back and forth of what's the one thing I can change, but the no is not forever. You have to remember that the top slots in the two biggest app stores of both Apple and Google, the top slot is not just new games; it's new and updated games. So if you got rejected, ask them why. Ask them what could improve it. Maybe come out with a couple updates, get that improved KPI that they wanted to see, maybe add in some kind of other feature, add in guilds, add in something that is going to improve it to a point that they're going to want to feature it. The feature has to be significant. It has to be kind of a game changer. It has to be something that really changes something that they wanted out of it. So the ratio of pitches that does get rejected is pretty high. It's unfortunate, but that's just kind of how it is. But a lot of the people that we work with now actually had pitches rejected. We potentially didn't see something in the first game, but coming back to the second or the third and improving on those things, the later ones were, and they're some of our best titles.
Yeah, often rejections can be a continual conversation. It can be, we've signed devs who came in 3 months into development and said, here's my project, here's the direction we're going. They'll talk to us, and then there'll be a rejection. But 6 months later, come back to us, really taking in what we said and gave them feedback for, and then we realized, wow, you guys have done an incredible job here. This is something we're now interested in, and have gone on to sign those developers.
This is the fun slide. These are the things that have happened that probably stay with me longer than they should. A couple of these, just to get into them and give you specific stories. The email subject line, that's where this entire presentation came out of, was during and after a conference. I had an email chain about 10 long from 10 different developers. The subject line was follow up, or follow up from GDC, from Casual Connect. And Gmail likes to stack things, so none of these looked unique. Some of them, weren't even signed with a name. They were just a very brief pitch. And so there's nothing unique about that. You want to make sure even subject lines, the most simple thing. Make sure you put in, you can put in our name so you know who you're talking to keep your own email lists organized. Put in what your game name is or your company name, something unique so that I can quickly search for it in my inbox. That's just kind of a simple thing to fix that. Double dipping, things like that. This is when you pitched one, it got rejected, and less than 24 hours later, you're pitching a whole new concept. And then 24 hours later, you're pitching another one, and each one is a little bit smaller of a pitch than the last. And it's not a strong front to put out there. If things do get rejected, it's good to sit down and consider why, and consider if that's something that you want to work on and come back to. Some of these other ones are just kind of fun stuff. I know John's put in the tagline issue.
Yeah, pretty much for the last year, it's been pitches that are, this game is Crossy Road plus, and pretty much every single tagline starts with that. And man, I would just love if developers came in and said, you know what this game actually is? Yeah, it has some things like Crossy Road, but here's what we're doing differently. Here's where we're going to stand out. And it's not just Crossy Road plus Clash Royale plus Puzzles and Dragons. This is our vision for this game, and here's why this game's important. Like, come to us and sell us on your game. Don't come in and sell us on Crossy Road and why Crossy Road is so great, because we get sold on Crossy Road pretty much every hour upon the hour.
The new one is Clash Royale in space, in westerns, in zombies, in I've seen a lot of things in space. The one specifically that I put in is ask me if I'm in accounting, if I'm at a conference and I'm talking, nuts and bolts on some of the game designs and publishing. I'm probably not in accounting. It's just, don't do that. And then lie. We are, like most of the publishers, most of the platforms that you want to work with can be pretty transparent. You can figure out, why there's rejections, why there's acceptance. In terms, if they're not being transparent about terms, walk away. So we do this thing where if people want to talk to any developers that we've worked with in the past, we promote that. And you can easily talk to anybody. So, we talk to a lot of people. If there are facts in your pitch that are not accurate, it will probably come back. And that just is not good for anybody. And the same things will go both ways. You want to pretty much know everything about the person that you're talking with, and they want to know about you. So don't lie.
Yeah, so we just really wanted to give a really quick case of what it looks like on our side, what we're looking at in terms of requests and games that are coming in. So in February 2016 this year, we announced the Launchpad X initiative, which was our incubator for experimental games. And we just wanted to show some of the numbers of what we're seeing on our side. So just in the first 24 hours, we had 75 game pitches hit our inbox. And we ended up getting around 250 game pitches even before GDC even started. Out of that grouping, we signed about 4 to 5 of those games. So about 80% of the pitches that we're getting are getting rejected from the first email. Like, we're not even getting into a conversation at this point. It's basically the email is hitting the inbox, and we're not going to pursue that game. And one thing we like to do as a publisher is we like to respond to every email and say, this is why we don't want to sign this game. But we can only do so much. And so 80% are gone after the first conversation, and then another 14% will make it into some small conversation and then are rejected after the first or second email. The 3 biggest mistakes we saw from this grouping is that there was no data on the team. They didn't talk about who was working on this game. I knew nothing about this development team. In a lot of ways, we care just as much about the developer as we do about the game that's being pitched. And speaking of game that's being pitched, a lot of these pitches did not explain what the game actually was. Again, it was that real brief, vague Crossy Road plus, and that's not
space.
Plus space, Crossy Road and space. And we're really looking for you to think. We're really trying to figure out how you think about games and why you think this game is important, and then having a conversation with us about it. And the third one is, which is almost as common as the second one, is that developers talk about how their game's going to monetize, but then don't actually explain how their game's going to monetize. They say, this game's going to make money. And that's it. That's all they say.
There was one developer who emailed in not in his right mind as well, I think.
Yeah, and just a couple of the highlight pitches from this grouping of 250. One developer admitted they were drunk in the pitch while they were sending us in the pitch, said, sorry, I'm a little bit drunk right now, but here's the game pitch. We've had other developers send in an incredible game pitch, like one of the best pitches we got in the grouping, and they didn't put their name on it. They didn't put their team information on it. That game is still floating in our inbox, waiting for someone to claim it. It was really incredible.
Going back to the second slide, if the game is not good, none of this will help. You know, really, you should be focusing most of your effort on the game. You know, pitching is really important, and once you kind of get it down, it's a skill set. It's something you can improve, and it kind of sticks with you. But, you know, the game is going to take a lot longer. The game is going to take all your efforts, all your energy into making all those things that you guys as developers do and do very well. So perfect your pitch, get better at it. You know, keep on doing it, practice with it. You will be able to do this. You know, everyone is just people. You can talk to them, and I think that's there. So just our information. Feel free to email us both. I am the business development manager at Congregate. I generally am the person that people talk to first, second, third, and last. So just any questions you have at all, just find me there. Find me after this. We have a booth 402 if you just want to come by and chat.